Hello everybody, it's Jen. Welcome to day 9 of the holiday card series. This is also my first design team project for Heffy Doodle, which you can catch over on their blog as well. We're creating a fun, festive, one-layer scene card using Santa's Village and the Holiday Sentiment Duos. To get started, I grabbed my Heffy Doodle memo tape and placed that about 2/3 of the way down on my card panel. This is going to help me figure out where I want to line up all my images, and it's going to be the bottom of the little focal panel that we're going to create for this one layer card. I've gone ahead and I've stamped out all the images I want to use on some masking paper. Leaving the backing in place, I'm going to go ahead and use all of my masks here to help me line up my images and figure out placement for this particular scene. So if you're new to masking, you want to ensure that you're cutting your masks on the black lines of your stamped images. This will ensure that you get a nice crisp line for when you go to create your background for any scene card that you're making. So once I had all of my stamps laid out, I'm going to use the masks to help tell me which stamps I need to stamp first. So the ones laying on the top are the ones that I'm going to want to the forefront, and also the ones that I'm going to want to stamp first to create my little scene. So for this card, that will be the stack of presents, Mrs. Claus, and then the candy cane that Santa will be holding in his hand. So I can go ahead and pick those up with my stamp positioning tool and then ink up my images. I forgot that little one gift mask there, so I just had to remove that quickly before adding my ink. And then I can go ahead and add the masks. I've now removed the backing, and those are adhered to my card panel. Now I can go ahead and stamp out the second set of images that I want, and you can see here that I bring in the masks again just to help ensure that I actually have things lined up where I need them to be. So masks can definitely be your friend when you're creating scene cards. Once I have those images down, I can go ahead and stamp out the rest of the images that I want to use. So the images that are going to be in the background are the ones that you want to stamp last. And in this case, that's my little Santa's workshop, the North Pole sign, and that final little gift to the left-hand side of my scene. I am going to go ahead and make sure that all of my masks are down. And then I went ahead and grabbed some Heffy Doodle memo tape again, and I'm going to add that about 1 inch down from the top of my card panel so I can create my focal point background with some ink blending here. You may have noticed that I left the top part of the workshop and the North Pole sign outside of the area where I'm going to be blending, and I just did that for a little bit of added interest to what is a fairly clean and simple card. So I'm using my Mermaid, Lagoon, and Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide inks to do a smooth blend for this background, and I thought the blue would really allow the images to pop. Once I have my blending done, I can go ahead and remove the memo tape, and I have this really nice focal panel for my images. Once I remove all the masks, I can go ahead and start my coloring. I've left all the caps to the left-hand side of the screen, and the marker cap to the top is always the darkest color that I'm going to be using, and then moving down to the lightest color. So for the reds, I'm using my favorite Christmas red color combination, which is the R39, the R29, and the R24. I knew that I wanted the red to be a predominant color for this card, as well as green, given that it's a holiday card. So I'm just using my lightest marker here to figure out what areas on the card I want to color in red. So obviously Santa's suit, but then I also wanted to balance that color out so it appears throughout the card. I decided to color the North Pole in some red and white stripes, as well as the candy cane for that traditional look. And then there's also some pillars on the workshop, and so I decided to color those in the same kind of red and white stripe pattern. Once I had the areas laid out with the lightest marker, I went ahead in with the darkest marker, the R39, to add my shadows, and then blended that out with the R29, which is my mid-tone. Once I have that down, I can go ahead and add the highlight color or the lightest color, which is the R24 in this case. And you can really see how this 3-color combination just gives really great definition. For our little elf, I wanted to use a bright Christmas green, so I chose G28, G19, and G02. Again, just adding the darkest marker where the shadows would be. So to the sides of his hat, underneath his head would cast a shadow on his arms and his neck, and then anywhere where his clothing is kind of touching or over top of something, so underneath his belt and then underneath the little ruffle around his neck as well. There'd also be a little bit of a shadow underneath his coat, so I wanted to ensure that I had some of that dark color there as well. So moving on to the skin tones, I kept these fairly simple using E11 and E00 and then a little bit of R20 for the blush, and I did keep their skin tones all the same just for ease. For Santa's beard and Mrs. Claus's hair, I wanted to keep that a white color, so I'm bringing in my warm grays in W3 and W1 and then blending that out with my colorless blender, ensuring that I leave a lot of that area white so that it appears white, but the little bit of color that I add gives some shading and definition. For the elf, I decided to color his little tuft of hair there in the same color, but I didn't leave any white space, so it looks like it's a little bit more of a grayish brown tone. For Mrs. Claus, I thought I would bring in some pinks to give her a little bit of a non-traditional Christmas color for her dress, and I wanted to add some pink around the card as well, so I used the pink on some of the presents to the right, as well as to the top of the present on the left-hand side. Later coming in here, you can see that I added some of the pink to the awning of the workshop as well as the door. So now I'm going to come in with my C markers. These are cool gray markers. I'm using C3 and C1 on the areas that I want to appear white, but I did want them to look different than the white that I used for the hair. So that's a good tip in terms of choosing a warm gray versus a cool gray. So typically the rule of thumb is you want to use your cool grays for things that are non-living and then warm grays for things that are breathing. But you can use whatever grays you happen to have. So now I'm going to come in and color the areas that I want to be black. I'm using a 2-color blend here. I did use a lot of 2-color blends for this card just because some of the areas are quite small and I didn't want to risk getting some bleeding. So I'm using the C7 and the C5 marker for the black areas and just using that for the shoes and the belt on Santa. I will come back and add some of this black to the workshop as well. I wasn't quite sure what color I wanted to do Santa's workshop. I chose this kind of almost a gingerbread-like color of browns. I'm using E35, E34, and E31. And you're going to see here, I actually forget to color underneath the Santa's workshop sign. I will realize that I forgot that in a little bit here and come back and fix that. But for now, I'm just going ahead and coloring this up, making sure to have shadows underneath the roof and the awning and around the door, and then where some of their bodies, the Santa and the elf, would cast a shadow back onto the house. So here's where I noticed I missed that little spot underneath the sign. And now I'm bringing back the cool grays to do the roof and the top of the chimney, as well as on the window and door. I only had a few little areas left to color up. Sometimes when you're creating a scene, you don't know exactly what colors you want to use, so I suggest just going ahead and laying those colors down that you know you want to have on certain images, and then you can always come back and fill things in like I'm doing near the end of the card to balance things out. As a final step for my coloring, I grabbed my B02 marker, and this matched the background blue really closely, and it's just allowing me to fix up some of those areas where my ink blending didn't quite get all the way to the images themselves. So now that I have everything colored up, I can go ahead and stamp my sentiment. And the sentiment I chose reads, "Happy holidays, enjoy the magic of the holiday season." So I'm going to do some masking here as well. I'm going to go ahead and reuse some of that memo tape. No sense in wasting if there's still areas that are quite perfectly fine to use. So I just trimmed that up and I went ahead and masked the bottom part of the sentiment off. I grabbed some red ink and stamped the happy holidays in red. And now I'm going to go ahead and mask off that top part of the sentiment and use my black ink for the bottom part. I did add a clean piece of memo tape to the top just because I had recently stamped that with the red ink and I didn't want to risk getting that red ink on my card. So now I have my sentiment done. I can go ahead and place this on my card panel. So this is a standard A2 size card at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Of course, I got my fingers in the ink, so I just used my white eraser to quickly get rid of that off the white area of my card panel. And now I can go ahead and work on some final details, just using a glitter pen here to add some glitter to this card. This is a great way to add a little bit of pizzazz to what is a fairly clean and simple card. I'm also going to bring in some Nouveau glaze, which will give a raised effect to the areas where I add the glaze. It's much like a glossy accents if you're familiar with that. And it will dry clear. So again, this just adds a little bit of extra to our scene card here. So that's our completed card for day 9. Here's a couple more videos or one more video for you to watch until my next holiday card is posted. Thanks so much for joining me. Don't forget to go over and check out Heffy Doodle, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Take care, everybody. Bye.